Thank you for listening to the show on Really Big Something Channel. October 31st, 2017.
The Kuhner Report, presented by Kelly Financial Services.
We're back at it. Good to have you with us. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. And let me just mention, since we've been talking about books, I did a book on talk radio, on the power of talk radio, and I hope you'll get a chance to take a look at it. It's called Airing the Wave. And it was over a couple of years that I wrote this because it's about this field and having so much power and influence over issues that we've done a number of campaigns over the years that I talk about in the book. And if you have an opportunity to take a look at it, that would be great. I think you're going to enjoy it as a talk radio aficionado, as many of you are. It's called Airing the Wave. And it's available at the Barnes & Noble website, at Amazon, and I think iTunes, all of those that offer the sale of books. Airing the Wave. I hope you take a look at it. What we're going to take a look at now is something that is very troubling. And it is interesting that all of Hollywood is shaken by this terrible scandal. Started with Harvey Weinstein, but now it's gotten to Kevin Spacey and others who have been abhorrent in their behavior toward women particularly, but in the case of Kevin Spacey, literally at a party with other actors, takes a 14-year-old boy, throws him on the bed, and proceeds to sexually abuse him. Spacey at the time was 26. That's the latest of these. Rose McGowan, Angelina Jolie, Gwyneth Paltrow all talk about what happened to them. And there's a documentary film called An Open Secret, and one of the people involved in that film is Matt Valentinus. He's here, and I'm delighted to have him on the program to talk about this and expose this horrifying problem in Hollywood. Matt, good to have you with us. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Tell us about An Open Secret and what it tries to portray.
Well, An Open Secret is a documentary that follows 5 young actors and their lives about how they were taken advantage of and molested in the industry, and how it's it is like a systemic process that has been going on for decades. And the industry is just rife with pedophiles at every level. And they scout and groom children at a young age, and they pass them up the level. They pass them up like a chain of pedophiles to have some really debaucherous and insane parties that people would not believe. And it almost sounds unbelievable when you hear about it and when you learn about it, but it's true. And if you watch the documentary An Open Secret, you'll see some of the things that these young boys are talking about that happens to them.
It's truly horrifying. And you're talking about young boys here. Are these boys in the acting industry, or are they just victimized by people in Hollywood?
Well, it's mostly acting. It's also singing. Some of them cross over from acting and singing. There's a lot of rumors of kids that are on those shows, Disney shows, Nickelodeon shows. They'll start out on those shows, and then they'll eventually become big stars or big popular singers. Without naming names, I think people know who we're talking about. And in our documentary, we did try to get some women involved, some young girls involved who this happened to, but they're still very active in the industry, and frankly, they were so in distress that even their parents couldn't really control them or get them to participate in the documentary. And it's really hard to get people who are in the process of being abused to talk about it. It takes 10 or 20 years later for them to really talk about it.
That's what happened with the Weinstein case, too, and these are adults, much less children. So you have that difficulty. And one of the problems is these young women. Now, did you primarily deal with the pedophilia problem, or with the sexual abuse generally?
Our focus was specifically pedophilia, because I had lived out there for years, and I had done this documentary with a friend of mine. We had went to NYU together. He's a hedge fund guy. He had a lot of money, and he wanted to do something to give back to women or children who've been victims of violence or sexual abuse. So the reason why we focused on Hollywood is because it's the most exaggerated place for where this happens. We know that it happens in small towns all around the world.
Right.
So we're not, but Hollywood was the best place to do it because it happens on such a larger scale. There's more kids going there, and the people that are taking advantage of them are going there to take advantage of them, and the tools that the people have to take advantage of them are even greater. You know, they're putting these kids in film roles. They're flying them on jets to premieres in London. You know, their parents are probably often more susceptible. A lot of times their parents send their kids to go live with these managers because they might be living in Oklahoma and they can't afford to move out there. So it's a breeding ground for pedophiles, and they've got it down to an organized system. I mean, it's almost like a RICO statute type of system where the feds, I pray that they're doing some sort of a task force right now to really bring these guys down. This isn't just a random thing. It's highly organized. And
you know, my next question, Matt, my next question was going to be precisely about the RICO statutes. You read my mind, because you've got this ongoing conspiracy, and I'm assuming, is it correct to say that these are, first of all, children wanting to get into the entertainment field, so they're vulnerable to begin with. So they get the flights on the jets, they get to live in these lavish ways, and all of a sudden the price to pay is the pedophilia being used against them. And so, really, they're in a no-win situation, because they're, as hard as it is for an adult to come forward, it's even that much tougher for a kid, isn't it?
It's almost impossible. And we do have one example of a child who comes forward in our film. He was 11 when it happened to him. By the time his instance went to trial, he was 18. And the guy that molested him only got 6 months in jail. And the guy that molested him was the same guy who molested Corey Feldman and Corey Haim. So, I mean, he has a history of this. And a lot of these guys that have histories of these prior convictions are still actively working today. Like in our film, if you watch it, there's a guy named Brian Peck. He's best friends, or very good friends, with Bryan Singer, who's probably one of the most successful directors in Hollywood today. In our film, in the 48 to 50-minute section, you'll see Brian Peck and Bryan Singer are doing the commentary for the X-Men DVD for Fox, 20th Century Fox Studios' biggest franchise. And in that DVD commentary, they're showing the scene where Brian Peck is working at a hot dog stand, okay? And they open up on a little kid, and it goes to the hot dog stand. And behind the hot dog stand is another guy named Gary Goddard, who I'm not saying is a pedophile, but he's had a lot of allegations and suspicions brought against him. Brian Peck is a convicted registered sex offender. He wasn't at the time that Bryan Singer put him in this movie, but he put him in a movie later, Jack and the Beanstalk, after he was convicted, right? So Bryan Singer hangs out with a lot of convicted pedophiles. He hangs out with this guy named Mark Collins Rector, who started something called the Digital Entertainment Network, which was like the Netflix of its time in the late 90s. And they got up to $150 million of investments, and they were just making terrible little, like, home movies that were like pedophile fantasies. One of them was called Chad's World. The business went totally up in flames, but everyone was getting high salaries, and they were just using this mansion that they bought to throw parties for young boys.
Would they throw these boys around? In other words, would the boys, number one, is it strictly boys that we're talking about here, or is there any
Yes.
women and girls? It's strictly boys.
No.
Okay.
Strictly boys.
All right. So now, do the boys wind up getting tossed from one pedophile to another in Hollywood?
Yes.
And
Yes,
would we
they
be
work
surprised at who the names are of these pedophiles? Are they well known, and can you name any of them that might be well known? Well, we know Kevin Spacey did what he did.
Yeah, Kevin Spacey's been on our radar for a long time. And if you'll see, Kevin Spacey has been in a number of Bryan Singer's films. You know, they did Superman together. They did The Usual Suspects. I don't know if they might have done anything else, but they're good friends.
Let's go to George in Lincoln. Let me get some calls for you. If you folks want to respond to this, we're talking about the Hollywood jet set with these criminal activities taking place, and it's only now coming to the surface. We've heard about the sexual abuse of Harvey Weinstein against who knows how many women over a 20 or 30-year period. Now we're talking about pedophilia, and the Kevin Spacey revelation in the last couple of days triggered a lot of that in terms of public conversation. George in Lincoln, for our guest, Matt Valentinas. You're on the Voice of Boston WRKO with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner. Hello.
Hi, I don't know much about Hollywood, but I did read a lot about the sports world and Sandusky. And I just wanted to ask you about how powerful the lawyers are that they bring in to protect these institutions. So, for example, the administration, in order to protect themselves against the Sandusky pedophile nexus, call it.
You're talking about the University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So
or Penn State, I should say. Not University of Pennsylvania. Penn State. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Penn State. And they brought in a retired FBI director, who's also in the news, Mueller. And he, you know, that guy, speaking of RICO, the FBI usually uses the RICO statutes. But I was wondering how powerful.
That's what I'm calling, that's what I think this is calling for here. You know, we're so ensconced in what's going on in Washington with all those investigations that really out in L.A., there's nothing going on. And we need like a federal level style investigation. We need a congressional investigation into Hollywood because it's gotten that bad. It is that infested. And I think the system is so corrupt and the studios are wrapped up. Not that the studios, you know, it's only a small percentage of people in Hollywood that are actively doing this, but they're at such a high level that I think the studios are very worried about getting majorly sued, right? Like, let's say Fox gets sued big time for one of their big franchises, or let's say several kids get together on a very popular show on Nickelodeon and start to sue. Those are the types of things that we're gonna start seeing, I think, in the next 6 to 18 months, and it's going to be like the Catholic Church scandal all over again. And the liability here is insane. It's insane because most of the time, all they've been trying to do is shut it down, cover it up, and everything has been done with settlements. And we know of a lot of settlements out there. And all it's going to take is for one or two of these kids to come forward and say, you know what, I did sign this settlement for $5 million with this guy 3 years ago. And once that levee breaks, it's going to break huge. And we're going to need new policies in place. Just last week, this guy named Tyler Grasham, who was one of the lead child agents in the industry, represented kids who are on Stranger Things and are in that It movie. I mean, one of the best child agents. He's known for grooming kids. He's been charged with raping, either young men or trying to get 16-year-old boys to date him. And he sort of runs in a circle of pedophiles. And that's going to be the next thing that gets exposed. And you're going to see how that, he'll have kids over for a party. And then the kids that he can groom, he'll promise them to get on a show.
Let me pick it up. Well, of course, he'll give them an enticement. Let me pick it up on the other side. Our number to Boston, if you folks want to share in the conversation, On WRKO a number of years ago, I did a whole expose for a week about what was going on in the Catholic Church and the pedophile problem there, and certainly, as Matt just mentioned, that was a huge scandal, and it's getting that way in Hollywood now, too. Our number to Boston is 617-266-6868, 617-266-6868. Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. We're back at it. Good to have you with us. Mike Siegel in. Matt Valentinas is with us. He has been part of a film that's been produced, documentary called An Open Secret. We'll get right to your calls. Matt, how can people view An Open Secret to learn about what's going on in Hollywood with pedophilia, going after children who are trying to get into the entertainment field?
Yeah, we're screening it online for free right now. It's on Vimeo. If you go to our Twitter, An Open Secret, you'll find the Vimeo link there. If you go on our Facebook, An Open Secret Doc is our Facebook. You'll find the Vimeo link there. And if you go to our YouTube channel, An Open Secret, you'll find it there. So we posted it everywhere. It's all over the internet.
So if you go to YouTube, you go to youtube.com.
Use the Vimeo link because it's better quality. There's some pirated YouTube links out there that aren't as good.
All right. So if you go to Vimeo on Facebook or Twitter.
Well, yeah, the Vimeo link to the film, that's just the service that it's running on, is on our Twitter, which is An Open Secret is our Twitter name. Or they can go to our Facebook page, which is An Open Secret Doc. And then on YouTube, they can just go to our YouTube channel, which is called An Open Secret.
Okay. And that's free, so people should take a look at it. Let's go to Tom and Quincy for Matt Valentinas. Tom, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO at 225. Hello.
Good evening, gentlemen. Matt, I go back with you to the Seattle days of 1992, and what a great talk show host and a consistent person you've been through the years.
Thank you.
For that.
Well, thank you very much. Those were great days, and we exposed pedophilia in Seattle in those days.
I remember on one of those current affair shows or something like that, of where there was a prominent gay rights activist in San Francisco that was at a library that was talking about underage Asian males in those days, how wonderful it was. And then when they came in with the cameras and they busted him, he went running for the hills.
Yep.
But anyway, your guest that's on there is great, because we really do need to expose Hollywood for the hypocrites they are. And I just look back when I lived in Boston in the 80s. We had a city councilor who was up and coming where I lived in Mission Hill in those days. Turned out he had a proclivity for young males, and when he got busted with it, he claimed it was homophobia. Well, nobody's saying that, and I'm glad with exposing this stuff, like what happened with Kevin Spacey. And I have to ask the listening audience, when was the last time a 30-year-old male actor grabbed a 14-year-old girl in a bedroom alone and did the threshold routine as was described? So I'm glad to see Kevin Spacey finally getting his comeuppance. And I don't care if the man's gay or not. There's one line in the sand that should be crossed in this culture, and that under age 18, if you're a grown adult, you do not have sex with people that are teenagers. It's just flat out wrong. And unfortunately, there's been a movement within progressive circles of where they want to do away with underage sex laws. Have you noticed that, Mike?
Absolutely. There's the NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. They work all over the world. They got it reduced, I believe, in Spain. They want it down to 14 years old, even 12 years old. They're not getting it, but they're in business to do their seedy operation. They've got a retired professor out of Johns Hopkins, who an aged fellow who has been their biggest advocate to reduce the age of consent down to 14. It's astonishing. Matt, I'm sure you know about those situations.
We do, and Kevin Spacey did us a really good favor last night or 2 nights ago, whenever it is he came out with that horrible excuse. Because obviously we've been accused of being homophobic, and we couldn't be farther from the truth on that, you know. But that The only people that have been ever called us homophobic are the pedophiles who are trying to cover this up. And they always try and deflect from this situation, right? Homosexuality and pedophilia they are not related. I know some religious people might think otherwise, but we take a scientific approach to this. And also, the country is so divided right now that we're hearing it from both sides. No matter who we get for an endorsement against this, one side doesn't like that we're talking to this person, the other side doesn't like that we're talking to this person. We are 100% focused on just battling sexual abuse because it affects everybody.
Absolutely.
And we're trying not to let it be deflected by politics. And really just outing everybody that does it because it's everywhere.
Let me ask you to. It is everywhere, and it's now publicly known thanks to your film documentary. It's exposed in Hollywood. We've had it exposed here in Boston already with the church. But one more time before we close, Matt, give us an open secret where people can see it absolutely free.
Yeah, go to our Twitter, Open Secret, ANOPEN Secret, or go to our Facebook, Open Secret Doc, or go on YouTube at our channel, Open Secret, and you'll find the Vimeo link there.
That's fantastic.
And this hashtag, if you're on Twitter or if you're on Google, you just hashtag an Open Secret, you'll find a million links to it. It's all over the Internet.
Matt, I appreciate your time. We'll certainly make it clear to the public it's available, and thank you for being with us and exposing this horrifying problem. Good to talk to you.
Well, thank you for having me on and letting us talk about it. We appreciate it.
You take care. Thank you. An Open Secret. Powerful film, powerful documentary, and it's powerful news right now. We'll come back to your calls if you want to talk about this and other things. 617-266-6868 at the Voice of Boston, WRKO.
WRKO, the Voice of Boston.
Welcome back in, folks. Good to have you with us. Mike Siegel here for Jeff Kuhner at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Not a pleasure to talk about this horrifying situation of pedophilia. Now, the scandals in Hollywood. An Open Secret is the film. It's a documentary. It's free on the, if you take a look at Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, you can watch it and learn about it. It's a horrifying event. But, of course, we had that happen here in Boston with the Catholic Church. Greg in Brockton, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello there.
I may be the first caller in the Boston area to call you what you are, the gold standard. I mean, for those who like talk radio because it's interesting and entertaining, Mike is all of that and then some because it's also cerebral. You have the best guests and delve into the topics in the finest way. So with that said, Hugh Hefner just passed away. Do you know who he called his hero, Mike?
I don't.
He called Alfred Kinsey his hero. And someday maybe you can have Dr. Judith Reisman, who has written 2 landmark books on Kinsey, on as a guest. And more potent. I heard this pastor say once, more potent than the American Revolution, more powerful than the Industrial Revolution, has been the sexual revolution in this country. I think it was John MacArthur who said that. And when you look at the impact of Kinsey, he was a pedophile. Hollywood glorified him in a film. Dr. Reisman's books, one of them is on Kinsey called Crimes and Consequences, and the other one, you really ought to read it. It's called Sexual Sabotage. And she calls Kinsey a mad scientist. And to the fact that what he did and the records are under lock and key, I think it's at the University of Indiana, is really a blight on this country.
Listen, there are those kinds of studies, and the endorsement of this kind of behavior is unconscionable. I mean, I way back when I was on the air in Miami in, I don't even remember now, in the 80s, NAMBLA was coming out and well known for its attempt then to reduce the age of consent to 14. And the argument would be made by this retired professor now, a professor emeritus at Johns Hopkins, and he would argue that it was a nurturing kind of relationship between the young boy and the man, that having a man mentor a boy, including in a sexual way, was helpful to the growth of the boy. It was absolutely sick, but it was out there, and we don't talk about it enough. Freddie in Beverly. Hello, Freddie. You're on with Mike Siegel at the Voice of Boston, WRKO, for Jeff Kuhner.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I'm glad this stuff is finally being exposed because this is nothing new, and Harvey Weinstein is not the exception. He's the rule, and there's much worse that goes on than what he has done. And I was going to say that this has been going on for a real long time in Hollywood. There's a book by Brian Siegel called Thanks for the Memories, and she tells a horrific story about how she was abused by, of all people, Bob Hope. It's very
who was the woman? Freddie, who was you were cut out there? Who was the woman?
Bryce Taylor, and she tells about how as a young girl how she was abused and what kind of system there is where young kids are abused and used in all kinds of ways and passed around to different people, different elites, that they can use them for sex toys. And it's horrific. And if you read this, and there's a lot of very detailed information that she puts in there that shows that it's a very, very disturbing thing. And there was a ex-FBI agent named Ted Gunderson who used to try to expose the pedophilia that goes on. And he one time found a ring where they were not only using kids as sex objects, pedophilia, but they were also using them underneath kindergartens or schools in satanic rituals. And he tried to bring this to the attention of some authorities, but they didn't want to know it. They didn't want to deal with it because there were too many big names that were involved, so they didn't want to get involved in it. And last point, if you look at John and Tony Podesta's taste in art, if you look at the type of art they collect,
yep,
there's paintings that look like of little children in underwear with red bottoms and tied up and things like that. So tell me that they're not into pedophilia.
Well, I don't know about the Podestas. I don't want to ascribe anything to anybody that we don't know about. We know about Kevin Spacey. We know about others. We know certainly about the Catholic Church here in Boston. And this program I did, a week of programs at WRKO, I think it was around the year 2000. And it was horrifying because we had people coming out who had been victimized. And you see what happens is these people put themselves in positions of authority in order to take advantage of the children. They'll become Boy Scout leaders. And now, of course, you've got girls coming into the Boy Scouts, which is astonishing to me. I mean, shouldn't there be a Girl Scouts and a Boy Scouts as separate entities? It's not sexist to have a group for girls and a group for boys. And what are you going to do? Go out on a camping trip, and the boys and girls have opportunities to sneak around with each other? Would a parent want to send their kid out that way? I mean, this political correctness, the transgender bathrooms, all of this is designed to open the opportunity up for these people to get into taking advantage of youngsters. I have always used the example, just with the transgender bathroom, for example, of the 15-year-old boy in a school. And let's just assume for the moment that he's perverted sexually and he goes after little girls. And so all of a sudden a 12-year-old girl goes to the girls' room. Now the boy says in his mind, because he knows what this Loretta Lynch idea is about transgender bathrooms, anybody can use it, he's going to say, oh, now I feel like I'm a girl. So guess what? I'm going to go into the girls' room. Why? Not because he feels like a girl really, but because he wants to take advantage of that 12-year-old girl he just saw. And sure enough, he goes into that bathroom, takes advantage of the 12-year-old girl. She becomes a sexual victim of the boy because of these sick laws that have been created. Absolutely sick. My answer is, whatever your physical anatomy is the restroom that you use. And if you do go through a sex change, then by all means use that bathroom. If you're a boy, you go through a sex change to being a girl, then go ahead and use the girl's room. But otherwise, no, you use the boy's room. But we can't even do that because the left-wing radical ideology wants to stifle that common sense approach. And I was saying about the people who are in positions of authority, these are people, as I said, who are in the Boy Scout leadership, for example, or Girl Scout if it's a female pedophile. You're talking about priests. They certainly have control. I mean, they are your way to God. The priest in the Catholic Church is of the highest caliber in terms of respect. And then many of the victims that I talked to who are victims of pedophile priests would say when they were kids, now they're grown up, that they couldn't go to their parents and tell them because the parents had so much respect for the priest. And that the priest was the spiritual leader of the community and of that family. And to say that, oh, my priest did this to me, wouldn't fly. So the kid would be afraid to tell even their own parent. And now you have the situation in Hollywood where they take control. How do they take control? Because these pedophiles in Hollywood are, they can be stars. He mentioned directors, major directors, people who are major movers and shakers in Hollywood who bring this life of glamour to these children who are wanting to get into the entertainment field as actors or as performers, as singers, as dancers. And what's the bottom line? They get used and abused. I mean, if you're given this lavish lifestyle, the lap of luxury, and you're flying around on airplanes of these people in Hollywood, and you're staying in 5-star hotels, and you're staying at a mansion of one of these celebrities, or you're being given parts in movies or opportunities to perform. That's how they exploit these kids. And I'm glad to see that this is getting out there. And you know what's very interesting about Kevin Spacey is that he apologized for what he did, but why did he have to put in there that he happens to now be gay? God bless him about that. You want to be whatever you want to be, or if your natural inclination is to be a same-sex relationship with another adult, consenting adult, that's your prerogative. That's your business. But why would he tie that in to having abused a 14-year-old boy when he was 26 years old? How does that take place? What's the connection? And he got lambasted, by the way, by people who are homosexual, women and men, in the entertainment field, who said, Kevin, you're off my list now. Don't you dare connect being a homosexual to being a pedophile. It doesn't work that way. And that's what he tried to do, as Matt said when he was on as our guest a few minutes ago, is that these people try to connect it to the homosexuality, and it isn't that, because there are heterosexual pedophiles. There are men who will abuse 12-year-old girls or 14-year-old girls, and we can go through lists of that. 617-266-6868 is the number to Boston. I'm glad to get your calls. And now if you're a parent of a 10 or 12-year-old child, you've got to be more protective than we've ever been in this country because of this. Scott in New Hampshire, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Fine.
Hey, this is quick. Yeah, I just one point, a while ago, I got two daughters. They're 16 and 18 now, but back when they were like 12 and 14, we brought them to this. I don't know, it was like a talent scouting, and it was down in Boston. And as parents, we didn't think too much about it, but once we really saw kind of the underlying thing, they almost want you to sign off your kids so they can have their way, if you will. And I just what I saw was a lot of people that were looking for that, like parents just to sign off their kids. And I don't know if you've ever heard of anything like that, but I can kind of see where this was all going. And we backed out. We just didn't want any part of that. I can see the sick trend, though, with these guys, and it's not getting any better.
A lot of times it's just a cover for carrying out that behavior against the child. And look, if you're a good parent for observing that, but a lot of parents might not even think of this being a problem. That's why we brought it up, because every parent needs to be on the alert about this stuff.
Thanks, Mike.
I appreciate it, and you really do. It's out there, and yeah, he went to a talent agency for his child and didn't like what he saw, and that's how they do this, and it's very dangerous. Christine in Foxborough. Hello, Christine. You're on the Voice of Boston.
Hello.
WRKO. Go right ahead.
If you are a male and you molest a young boy, you are a homosexual pedophile.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, what does that have to do with Kevin Spacey? Being homosexual is one thing. Being a pedophile, that's not against the law. Being a pedophile is obviously against federal law and every state law. Every state has a law against pedophilia in the country. Period. Case closed. We'll come right back to your calls. If you're on the line, stay right there at 617-266-6868. Good to have you with us. On the Jeff Kuhner Report, Mike Siegel in for Jeff today. It's a pleasure to be here at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. We're back in. Good to have you with us. Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at the Voice of Boston, WRKO, 2:53 in the afternoon it is. Don't forget Howie Carr right after the 3 o'clock news. Great program always. Let's go back to your calls, starting with Charlie in Revere at 617-266-6868. Charlie, go right ahead, sir.
Yeah, what's your first name?
Mike.
Mike, listen, I think you're doing a great public service exposing this stuff. I think you're a good man for doing this. What I wanted to say was, years ago, I knew, Nambia started in Revere, Massachusetts. That's where they started that first chapter of Nambia. And a friend of mine who's in organized crime, he told me how it works. He said, when you have a broken family, they take the children, they put them in the state. In the state, what happens is the social worker has a lean in that way, and he makes sure the child goes through a psychiatrist that has a lean in that way. Then they put him before a judge that has a lean in that way. So when the kid starts complaining, the doctor ends up medicating the kid. The psychiatrist ends up medicating the kid and makes the kid confused. But they've been doing that for years. There's a book by the Franklin Cover-Up out of Nebraska, and by John W. DeCamp, and he writes about it. It's the name of it's abuse, child abuse, Satanism, and murder in Nebraska. It's all the politicians that had their hands in it. That's why they're passing these laws, because they got their dirty secrets too. It's right across society, this stuff, and it's not going to stop unless people raise their voice and put a stop to it or allow it to happen.
It's horrifying. It's a system. It's very sophisticated, as he's pointing out, and the people who do this know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly how to groom these kids and bring them into their perverted, disgusting cesspool of a world. It is horrifying. And that's why the laws are so tough in this field. Skippy in South Boston, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello there.
Hello, Mike. Listen, there was a woman on prior to this last call. She didn't elaborate. She just made it any male that has sex with a male is a homosexual pedophile. And then she hung up. She didn't elaborate. I think what she might have been trying to say is this. Say, for instance, you got a male pedophile. Now, on the surface, he may be married, have children, but he's attracted to young boys. So by the very definition, his attraction is a homosexual attraction. I think that's what she might have been trying to say.
Yeah, no, I understand. But being a homosexual, if you're a 35-year-old man and you're in a relationship with a 30-year-old man and it's consensual, then that's very different than that 35-year-old man going after a 14-year-old boy, isn't it?
Exactly. I know I don't think that you can put a wide brush across all homosexuals, but just that the tendency as a male to seek out another male, at whatever, especially a young boy, prepubescent or whatever, and that in itself has homosexual tendencies. I think that's what she was trying to say.
Well, but that's not the case, because there are many heterosexual pedophiles too, men who go after girls. I mean, you see it in the news all the time about even these perverted teachers. I mean, again, it's getting into a position of authority. A male teacher who will seduce his 14-year-old or 15 or 16-year-old student. I know of a case of covered on the air, a principal of a middle school. Principal went after a 14-year-old girl in his school and seduced her. I mean, it's both ways, and so being a pedophile is a disgraceful crime. Being a homosexual is very different than that if you're dealing only with adults. Let's go to Hank in Salem, New Hampshire. Hank, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO.
Mike, how we doing, buddy?
Good, sir.
Have you ever heard of Operation Brownstone?
No.
Okay, look this up when you get a chance.
Okay.
In the 1980s, when George Bush Sr. was running the CIA, it's called Operation Brownstone under the gray line, blackmailing of Congress of the sex trafficking that the CIA was doing in the 80s, and they're still doing it today.
Oh, it's horrifying. It happens. I know of a political situation in another state where there was a boys' home, wayward boys, who were basically made available to sick and perverted politicians, public officials. It got that bad in this particular state. Paul on a truck. Hello, Paul. You're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO.
Yeah, good. How are you? Look, I'm going to bet anybody out there, give it 5 years, Weinstein will show up at one of those events that they love to throw each other, Grammys, whatever they are. I never watched them. And they'll give him a standing ovation for some reason or other. I'm willing to bet that. They
I hope.
Disappear for good.
Listen, they did it with Roman Polanski, didn't they? They gave him an Academy Award after he had raped a 13-year-old girl.
And everything, you'll be in the crowd or something. They'll all get up and clap. Guaranteed that'll happen. He ain't going to disappear. He ain't going to kill himself.
Well, you know, they do it. You may be right, but God forbid, in the case of Harvey Weinstein, that happens. This guy is beyond the pale. I don't know whether he did any acts of pedophilia. I have no idea. But I do know that Weinstein is sick, absolutely sick, just raping. You know, and you think about it, why do people in that position do that anyway? Even with adults, sexual abuse is absolutely a crime. And if you think about the settlements made by Bill O'Reilly, if you think about Weinstein, if you think about Roger Ailes, the chairman at Fox, now passed away, why do these people in these powerful positions do that? It would seem to me, at least, that if they want to have a relationship with somebody, a lot of women would be happy to do that. They're in positions of power and would be very agreeable. But no, these guys have to go after violating the law and then winding up being harmed in their careers, unfortunately. All right, we come back and do it again tomorrow. For Jeff, Mike Siegel here. Good to have you with us. And my pleasure. We'll be talking about a lot of great stuff, including picking up on where we left off with regard to this fraud by Bob Mueller going after Paul Manafort. Mike Siegel here. Be good to yourself and the world will be good to you.
The Voice of Boston is you. 680 WRKO Boston, 93.7 WEEI HD2 Lawrence, Boston. It's 3 o'clock.